Hello and welcome back to Kim Reads as we continue with Wicket, Chapter 7 of the Uprisings part. Taking the northern route over the Madeleines, she realized she would pass Lake George. She decided to pause there, about halfway home, interested to note that she is actually glad to be heading back. She paced the edge of the lake, looking for caprice in the pines, which she could not pick out the many resort villas that she had sprung since the visit in her youth. But it wasn't the visible terrain she was really seeing. It was the world at large. The character it seemed to have, how it seemed to refer to itself. How could Nessarose believe in the unnamed God? Behind every aspect of the world is another aspect of the world. In a sense, wasn't that what Dr. Dillerman had been on about? He had imagined another true foundation of a world, defensible by proofs and experiments. He had figured out how to locate it. But she was not a visionary. Behind the blue and white marbleized paper of the lake, beyond the watered silk of the sky, Elphaba could not see any deeper in. Now about the raw material of life, the muscle structure of angels' wings, the caterpillar reaction focusing on a gimlet gaze, nor about the gooey subjects of the Empyrean. Not about good if the unnamed God was good. Not about evil either. For who was thrall to whom, really? And could it ever be known? Each age working in collusion and antagonism, like the cold and the sun, sunlight creating a deadly spear of ice. Was the wizard a charlatan, a fraud, a despot of merely human power and failure? Did he control the adepts, Nessarose and Glinda, and an unnamed third, for surely it wasn't Elfie? Or was it to put him out by Madame Morrible that he did, to assuage his obvious ego, his appetite over the semblance of power? And Madame Morrible and Yakel, was there any connection? Were they the same person? Were they harsh divinities, avatars of a power of darkness? Were they the poisonous flitches struck from the evil body of the Cumbric witch? Or were they, singularly or together, old Cumbricia herself, or such it could be presumed to have survived from the heroic age of mythology into the scrabbled, cramped modern days? Did they govern the wizard, jerk him out from like a marionette? Who was enthralled to whom? And while you wait to learn, the deadly icicle, formed by all opposing forces, falls and drives its cold into penetrable flesh. She left the pine needles of shores of Lake George in a state of high frustration and energy, having no confidence to decide about matters of political or theology hierarchy. She felt driven to dig up these old notes she had collected from Dr. Dillman's study the day after he was murdered. Something concrete under her fingertips. A magnifying lens, a surgical knife, a sterilized probe. Perhaps now she was old enough to understand what he had been getting at. He had been a unionist essentialist. She was a novice atheist. But she still might profit from his work after all this time. The winds were with her as far as the lower slopes of the Great Kells. Thereafter, she had a harder time, both finding her way and keeping her seat. A number of times she had to dismount and walk. Fortunately, it wasn't very cold, and she came upon clusters of nomads in the protected valleys who had keeping her head in the right direction. Still, she was 2 weeks returning, even with the help of a broom. Later in the afternoon, the sun still hot and high compared to its winter habit, she toiled her way up the last slopes. Kiamo Ko rising its narrow or dark profile above her. She felt like a child looking up at the top hat of her gentleman. Eager to avoid ceremony and fuss, she skirted the village. Without the broom, this approach would be nearly impossible. As it was, even in the broom seeming to be feeling the effort. She came to a halt in the orchard, made her way to the back door and found it open, which meant the sisters were out flowering, picking, or some such nonsense. The place was quiet. She grabbed a browning apple from the sideboard and trudged up the steps of her tower without running into anyone. When she passed Nanny's room, she rattled on the door knob and said, "Nanny?" "Oh," came a little shriek. "You startled me. May I come in?" "Just a minute." There was the sound of furniture being dragged away from the door. "Well, this is a fine mess, Miss Elphaba. Going off and leaving us to be murdered in our beds are just as likely." "What are you talking about? Let me in." And not saying a word, you had us frantic worthy. The last piece scraped across the floor, and Nanny flung open the door. "You hideous, ungrateful woman." She fell heavily into her arms and burst into tears. "Please, I've had enough drama to last me the rest of my life," said Elphaba. "What are you going on about?" Nanny took a while to calm down. She rummaged through her bag for some smelling salts, pulling out little bottles and satchels to set up her own apothecary business. There were blue glass vials, clear pill boxes, snakeskin envelopes of powder and pills, and a beautiful little green bottle that had a torn old label on it, "Miracle Lit." She had administered calming agents to herself, and when she said she could breathe again, she said, "Well, you know, my dear, you saw, I suppose, that everyone had disappeared?" Elphaba scowled in confusion and rising sudden fear. Nanny took a very deep breath. "Now, don't be angry at Nanny. It's not Nanny's fault. Those soldiers suddenly decided that their exercises were finished. I don't know, maybe Nora told them you were gone. She told us she'd been sneaking around looking for your broom. She said you weren't here. She said she mentioned it to them. You know how nice they were to her, how they adored her. The soldiers came to the front door and said they needed to escort the entire family. Sarima and her sisters and Nora and Irji back to their base camp, wherever it is. They didn't require me, they said, which was very insulting indeed, and I let them know as much. Sarima asked why, and the nice Commander Cherrystone said it was for their own protection. In the case of finding Battalions come through, he said it won't do to have any members of the ruling family still there, or there might be a bloody incident. Coming through a battalion when Elfie hit the windowsill with her open palm. "I'm trying to tell you, no time soon," he said. "This is just advance in planning." They become insistent. These soldiers scattered the peasants in the village. I don't think there was any killing. All seemed quite humane except for the chains. Oh, and then only I was left behind, being too old to march down the stairs and no relations besides. Also, they left Lear, since he was no threat, and I think they became fond of him. A few days later, Lear disappeared too. I'm sure he was desperately lonely for them. He must have followed them to their camp. "And nobody protested?" shrieked Elfie. "Don't yell at me. Of course they protested." Well, Sarima fell in a heap, fainting dead away, and Irji looked after her. But the sisters, the mealy-mouthed lot, they barricaded the dining room door and set fire to the chapel wing, trying to draw to it the attention. And three slammed a sharpening stone on the hand of Commander Cherrystone and broke every bone in his wrist, I bet. 5 and 6 rang the bell, but the shepherds are too far away, and it all happened so fast. 2 wrote messages and tried to tie them to the feet of your crows, but they wouldn't be liberated. They just kept roosting on the windowsills again. Useless, tired old things. 4 had a great idea about boiling oil, but they couldn't get the flame high enough. Oh, and it was a merry chase for a day or two, but of course the soldiers won. Men always win. Nanny continued petulantly. We all thought they'd be ambushed you earlier to get you out of the way. You're the only effective one here, everyone knows that. They all think you're a witch. The townspeople told me that if you come back, you're to be in touch with the hamlet of Red Windmill down below the dam. You know the one. They seem to think you can rescue their royal family, such as they are. I told them it was a misplaced trust, that you wouldn't be interested. But I promised to give you the message, so here it is. Elphaba strode back and forth. She pulled her hair from its customary knot and took it out, as if she were trying to shake away what she was hearing. "Ancestry?" she said at last, cowering behind the piano in the music room, no doubt. "Well, this is a fine kettle of fish." She strode, she sat, she stroked her chin, she kicked Nanny's chamber pot and broke it. "What I have got," she mumbled. "There's the broom, there's the breeze. There's the bees, there's the monkey, there's Killyjoy. Did they hurt Killyjoy? There's Killyjoy, there's the crows. There's Nanny, there's the villagers, if they're unharmed. There's the questionable Grimmery. It's not a lot." "No, it's not," said Nanny, sighing. Doom, I say." "We can get them back," said Elfie. "We will." "Count Nanny in," said Nanny. "Though I never did like those sisters, I'll tell ya." Elfie clenched her fist and tried to keep from striking herself. "Lear gone too," she said. "And I came here to make my apologies to Sarima, and I lost Lear in the bargain. Am I good for nothing in this life?" Kiamo Ko was deathly still, except for old Nanny's labored breathing as she took a cat nap in her rocking chair. Killyjoy thumped his tail on the floor, happy to see his mistress. The sky was broad and hopeless beyond the windows. Elphaba was tired herself, but she couldn't sleep. From time to time, she imagined she could hear the sound of water lapping against the side of the fish well, as if the legendary underground lake was rousing to drown them all. And that is the end of In the Vinkus. So next one will be the final part. Thanks for listening.